Morning, Guy.
Morning.
And I've known Guy for, well, probably 10 years, known of the Groenwalds forever. And Guy is in the fur business. That's how he's made his living. And his father made his living in the fur business, correct?
Yes.
And your grandfather.
My grandfather, yes.
And what year did Groenwald start?
Really my grandfather came in the early 20s, like 1920, he started trading immediately, not really in fur, but the company basically started in the early 20s. So we're just at 100 or 101 years in existence. But the fur portion started more in the late 30s, early 40s.
Was it in these buildings here?
There was a building across the street, which was originally built for the hide business, and went bankrupt. And my father and his father moved to town with their kind of chicken and egg business, and they actually lived in that factory. And they did the chicken and egg business and started some fur business, and then they actually sold that building when a building on this side of the street became available, and that building is since gone, but it was kind of right on this site that they really started the fur business.
So there was a previous fur buyer right in this
There was
vicinity.
a hide, and not maybe so much fur, but a hide business that was built in the early, it was a two-story, typical looking brick factory that was across the street, and they had loading docks for the train and everything. It was a commercial enterprise, and it went out of business, and they bought the buildings, and we've since rebought the buildings, so we own that again now, and that's where we do our beaver processing over there. But there was an addition to that building, and that is really the only thing that is left. That addition we retained, and otherwise the factory we tore down in the 70s, and we've since built our beaver operation across the street there.
So your grandfather, he came through the Roaring 20s into the Depression.
Yeah.
And he weathered that okay?
No. They also were in the tractor business. They were an Alice Chalmers dealer, and they filed for bankruptcy during the Depression because they sold tractors on time, and a lot of people couldn't pay their bills. They banked here in town, and even though they filed for bankruptcy, they ended up paying all their debts back, so they really didn't have a blemish on their record because they just needed a little time to get that squared away. But that was, it was a difficult time.
Did your grandfather, was he born in this country?
No, he was born in Germany, and as the sort of the fallout from World War I, the political climate became, according to him, very untenable. He had Nazis and Bolsheviks, communists, actively campaigning in his town, and it was very difficult with crazy inflation, and he just couldn't get ahead. So he left the country when the political climate got too treacherous.
Do you remember you probably remember a lot of fur buying stories from either your grandfather. Of course, you were involved in it when your dad owned it. Anything that comes to mind right now? I know it's hard to pull things out of the files, those memory files, but...
Right. Of course, one thing you remember, I remember, very vividly is, the raccoon market went up in the 70s. And even though I was a little kid, the business that we were in was not a big business or, hugely scaled or anything. Yeah, we were a a pretty big regional operator, but when those raccoon numbers, when the price went up, it just became an absolute zoo, from 10, 12 employees to 70 employees in just a matter of years. Like the price ended up going to about $60, but when they hit like 25, I can remember right out here is the counter where we would buy from the trappers and hunters, and you went from never even sort of noticing in huge traffic, to just on Saturdays, I'd have to come in as a kid and push the carts away as they bought them. You couldn't hardly keep up, and it was just explosive. And just even in the community, people talking about the fur business, newspaper articles, it was just crazy. And buyers coming from just relatively few. We dealt in Germany a little bit, and you'd have a guy come a couple times a year to having 5 or 6 Europeans, Italians, Spanish, Germans, people from all over the world, coming on a weekly basis, sometimes 2 or 3 at a time.
So the fur buying has gone from the 1920s into the 70s. That was 50 years, and Groenwald survived all that time.
Right.
And you're in business now, and it's a harder time, but is there a common denominator within those 100 years as to why you guys have survived?
I would say a couple things. One is we tried not to put all our eggs in one basket, and number 2, I think the biggest problem in the fur business is like things where buyers think that they'll say, well, we're going to buy raccoon because the cost of production is this, and the price of raccoon would be $20, and everybody thought, well, a trapper needs $8 to go out and kill a raccoon. In other words, that's what it costs them, or a coyote, the same thing. And so a buyer would think, well, the market went down to 3, I'm going to pay 5 because the cost of production is 8, therefore next year they won't produce any. And that thinking is what has been the demise of most fur buyers. They think that somehow when you get below some magical number, there's going to be none. And they're very supply oriented in their thinking, and our company is definitely more demand oriented. We look at what the market is for the skin. If a muskrat is selling in Germany 30 years ago, 40 years ago, or Korea 20 years ago, or China last year, we look at what those are trading at in those countries, and they don't care how much it costs a trapper to produce that item. And just like when a muskrat can go to $17, a muskrat can go to $1. And it has nothing to do with production prices. And I think that is the one thing, at least as far as when I have run this business, I have never paid attention to production costs. They're meaningless to me, and it is what I think the market is, or not what I think the market is, what the market is wherever we're selling. And I think the second thing is that where the market is determined. Okay, so when a trapper looks at, thinking maybe where the market is determined, he actually may be a little bit incorrect in thinking that, oh, well, this dealer is paying this, or this auction is getting this, so maybe this guy has to pay this. But for us, we don't look at that. We don't look at what anybody else is paying. As a matter of fact, we oftentimes think it's ridiculous, maybe too cheap or even too high. We look at what that item is being traded at. It could be trading at a higher number than what everybody else is paying, or obviously it could be trading at a lower number, and that is what we look at. We don't care what others are paying. And like, even when you from a trapper's perspective, it may be frustrating, hey, Groenewald's is, paying, less than the market. Well, we're not paying less than the market. That's our perception of what's going to happen to the market. I'm not going to be able to get that item to China or get that item to Italy or get that item to Greece or wherever for 3 to 4 months or 5 or 6 months. And that is what my perception of what the market is going to do in that period of time. It has nothing to do with, I'm paying less or more than the guy down the street. And vice versa, sometimes, people, other dealers especially, they may think, wow, why is Groenewald's paying more than everybody else is paying? Well, it's because we don't care what everybody else is paying. We're simply paying what we feel the market is going to develop into. We see our customers are telling us, and we work with a lot of our customers in a different way. We're partners with them, and we own the goods until they're sold. So our customers give us a real accurate, assessment of, what they think is going to happen. And then we also, use our own judgment. We look at currency rates. We look at, world economic situation. Right now I'm really nervous about, the situation with Taiwan and China. So those things enter, into our picture because it's a large investment. Even with fur not being, that expensive, when you take some of the numbers that we do and that we just are in our inventory just in the sheer just doing business, those numbers add up to significant amounts of money. So we have a huge amount of risk, and we have to be very careful. We have to be very conservative, and you can lose a lot of money quickly. At the beginning of COVID, we really didn't know if we were going to be able to ship goods to China anymore. There was serious talk in China that they were going to make fur trading because they thought it had somehow caused COVID, which turned out to be not the case. But we had a huge amount of risk there, and it was rough. And 4 months later, China had kind of gotten rid of the virus, and internally, and their economy was kind of rolling because everybody else's wasn't. And we were kind of the first ones to know that. We, really, we were aggressive, and it was fun there again for another year. And then the next couple of years, we had shutdowns during the retail season, and it was difficult over there. And so you have to keep in touch with what's going on around the world, and that is what's I feel like kept us in business.
So when you were in the 70s, you were probably in grade school.
Yeah, sure.
And at some point you entered the business. Was that right out of high school?
No, I actually had fur routes when I was in high school. I started when I was like 15. I had to take a driver with me, and I bought until I went to college. I went to school in Nepal, and I actually came home like maybe the first couple years, and I went to college in '85. And by '87, the market was really poor, and my dad didn't really need me to come home and run the couple routes that I was running. They could take care of it. So for the next 3 years, I didn't come home. But then in about 91, 92, I came back home from college after I graduated and started buying again.
What'd you study?
I studied economics.
And so at some point, I don't know when in the Groenwald history, but I know you have Bryce, the young guy that works here, probably Gary too, maybe Greg before he got sick. Those are Guy's two brothers. Bryce is non-related, but you've traveled all over the world, really.
Yeah, sure.
When did that start?
For me, it started in '95 or so. I've probably been to China close to 100 times. For 30 years, I was going there, from 2 to 4 or 5 times a year. But we started in Germany. We started selling goods because my grandfather was there and sort of helped us with a few connections. and we started kind of trading there in 72, 3, 4, 5, something like that. And, traded with Germany, very actively until the Italians came in. And my dad was, traveling. But then my brother Gary lived in Berlin. And during the Russian boom, he traveled, all of Eastern Europe and Russia. And it was, it was really fantastic for our business during that period to be able to access Eastern Europe and Russia. It was a big part of the market in 2000 to 2015 or so. So yeah, it was very helpful. But yeah, we've extensively traveled, and we still. I don't really travel. I haven't traveled much since COVID. But Bryce, he's been in. Greece, Hong Kong, probably Copenhagen. I think he's going back to Greece here shortly, and he's going to be in Thailand. And, we still, actively travel. You gotta, it's important to see your customers. You learn stuff that you just can't learn, over the phone.
And Bryce, he's a young guy. Grew up here in Forreston, Illinois, as his dad has worked here. And I think you guys had Bryce going to foreign countries before he was old enough to drink.
Yeah, he was probably 20 or 19 when he started. He went to China maybe when he was... Terry, when did Bryce go to China? He was about 20?
I believe so.
Yeah, about 20. He went with Gary. And Bryce is definitely the true trader sense of in the fur trade. He's more so than I am. I'm more of a I don't know how to put it. I'm more of the sort of the economic. I look at it from a real economic sense, and Bryce is a pure trader, like the maybe more the original type fur trader was. And very experienced culturally. He's been to so many countries. Has so many friends from around the world in the fur trade. It's it's served us well to really promote our name around the world.
You got lucky from a local standpoint, having a couple of guys that come and work here.
Yeah, sure.
And have abilities.
Sure.
And,
yeah, I think. Allowing somebody to, have the opportunities is what attracts someone. That's the he's a good guy for the position. He has the quick mind for a trading mentality, which is what it takes. And when you see that, you've got to let him do it. That's the most important thing.
Yep. Now, I believe you told me you have 2 children.
I have 2 children, yeah.
What are they doing these days?
My daughter's a doctor in Chicago, and my son starts law school this week at Madison, University of Wisconsin.
So, forgive me for this, but your wife must be quite smart.
Yeah, she's a sharp lady, good mother. But my son's a little bit involved. My son's a environmental engineer, and we do some environmental work that, and he does actually do a little bit in the business. So our office for the environmental work is here. So yeah, so he was here all summer, and he'll be continuing.
So he's an environmental engineer, and now he's going to get a law degree. Yeah. Somehow he's got a plan to mesh those two, correct?
Right.
Yeah.
He's going to do mitigation banking, which is restoring of wetlands and selling the credits, and so that's what his deal is. We already do that, and he's going to continue it.
So going back to the international contacts, I mean, my assessment, and I don't know if it's right, but that's when you scaled, is when you developed. I mean, you were a regional buyer, and you might have said, well, 1987, everything's tanking, including the stock market, fur markets. But you started you started traveling, you said, in the mid-'80s, and developing worldwide contacts, a lot of them.
Yeah, I think that you could still you could still run a fur business and not have the crazy worldwide connections, but as far as sales outlets. But the thing that it provides you with is you know what the market is, and like I said, the investments are so significant that would you buy an automobile without looking it over? And we have to know what the market is before we're going to buy, and that's the thing that it provided us. The other thing that I haven't really mentioned is I said that I was I'm sort of in the fur business through I love economics, and that's what I like to. Bryce is a trader. My father was an engineer, and some of the investments we made in everything from packing technology to processing technology is what kept our costs in check, especially in the last 25 years, is what's kept us in business, or we wouldn't be here.
Yeah, to a certain degree. You could say you've automated
We certainly have, yeah.
in the processing. Yep.
And I'm certain we wouldn't be doing this if we hadn't.
Your father, as an engineer, did he develop and build some of this stuff?
He did a lot of the stuff outside of the scraping. He helped me a little bit with the scraping. I worked with a fur dresser a little bit that helped me, and when I came back into the business, I was running the North Country, and buying beaver, and I wanted to be competitive. And I saw that, we could scrape a coon, fairly economical. We could, we were doing it by hand, but we had such a scale that we could beat most people, But the beaver, we just couldn't, process it. No matter what you do, you just couldn't scale it. And we saw that there was a possibility of doing it on a machine, and we purchased our first machine and gave it a whirl, and we had to do a lot of adaptations. A wild fur skin is not like a pig skin, it's not like a cow skin. Every one is so different, and even different sections you have to scrape differently, because they have softer leather, they have harder leather, they have harder fat, softer fat, and so it was difficult to adapt, but we did it, and ironically, we did it kind of for the hatter business, because we were really trying to take a piece of that. And now, we certainly need it for the hatter business, because that's a major portion of our business right now.
If you had to take a guess over the years, that machine that does your beaver, how many would you think have run through that machine?
Oh, we run, on the beaver side, 50, 60,000 a year. Mm-hmm. But we've run certainly a couple 100,000 coon through it a year. So some years. Plus the coyotes, 350, something like that. We've been using it on beaver since, I don't know if we used it before 2000, maybe 97 or 98, maybe 97. But if you average even a couple 100,000 skins, a year since 2000, that's some real numbers.
On another topic, and this, I believe it's historic in that the fur buyer and the fur seller are adversarial. And probably not from the fur buyer side, but the fur sellers, the trappers, it's just historical tradition. They're always getting screwed from their perspective. What do you have to say about that?
Well, I guess the thing that I think I touched on it a little bit when I said that we are so demand oriented in how we look at the market, and a trapper looks at it a lot of times from supply. They'll show up at the truck, and there's two guys at a stop, and they say, well, gosh, there's nothing being produced. The market's got to go up, And how can he still be paying, when there's nobody here? Well, we don't look at that. And I think the other thing is there's just such an illiquid market for fur that you have to put in a margin for that illiquidity. Like if you were a coin buyer, a silver bullion buyer or something in a strip mall somewhere, and you were buying bullion, you could probably operate with, very small margins. But, the difference between that and the fur business is, the next day, you can turn that purchase into cash and get your margin. And in the fur business, you pure and simply cannot do that. And, I think a big underestimation on both maybe even competing dealers, people that buy fur, and the trappers, it's a misconception, is that somehow that fur, has like some intrinsic value, or that it's more liquid than what it actually is. Fur is just extremely, non-liquid. And, some items we can sell once a year. Some items you can sell more than once a year. Some items, we may find something come along every 5 years. And, it's that I think is, why maybe, in all businesses, is when there's an adversarial buy-sell relationship, it can be acrimonious. But the fur business in particular, when it's such an illiquid commodity, and there's so many unknowns. The trapper doesn't truly know, all the hidden risks that are associated with me owning that piece of fur. If I buy a raccoon from a trapper, that raccoon is not so. I've got to scrape it. There's a possibility something could go wrong. I've got to dry it. I've got to, they're in the drying room when you're drying thousands of raccoon a day. There's something that can go wrong. In shipping, you can get something confiscated if you do something wrong. In the dresser, we take our skins all the way through dress. At the dresser, something can go wrong, and the dresser says it's not his fault. It's always my fault. And then you import it into Thailand, something can go wrong. When you turn around and import it into China, something can go wrong. And then you're not even talking about market risk yet. And then there's market risk. There can be an epidemic. There can be, some political unrest. There can be a war. The Ukrainian-Russian war has been, horrible for this business. Ukraine, forget Russia, and their economy is decimated by this and has bought less stuff. The Ukraine itself was a major user of fur. Ukrainian people wore all kinds of fur, and we just, overnight, just one day, lost them. And there's so many risks associated with this business, and I think that if we assess those risks properly, and when we buy fur, it can make for some difficulty. Yeah. So anyway, that there's a lot of risk associated with this business, and and if they're if you truly assess those risks, maybe you wouldn't pay anything for fur. So you do have to close your eyes to some of the risks if you want to be an aggressive buyer whatsoever, but you can't completely close your eyes to the risks associated with this trade.
Well, and then you have the everyday expense that I assume most non-businessmen have no clue about.
Yeah, expense, and especially lately has, I can remember going out and, it wasn't that many years ago that, you couldn't even hardly figure your costs on an item as far as buying it because, you'd go out and sometimes I'd go out on a Friday and come back on a Saturday and I'd have a hotel invested and, a little diesel fuel. Diesel fuel was, I think in 98, I bought diesel fuel, still for under $1, and you'd go out and you'd buy, 2,500, 3,500 raccoon in a weekend. Well, even if your costs for the weekend were, $400, it's 10 cents a raccoon, and that's just the raccoon you bought. you bought muskrats, you bought coyotes, you bought beaver, you bought, deer hides. And when you start trying to figure your cost, it was just nothing. And today, all those costs have just, gone up exponentially, and the amount of fur you buy when you go out on the road is a percentage of what you used to buy. So, if you buy 500 raccoon on a weekend, and you can see the costs, are much higher. Your diesel fuel is $500 for the weekend. Your, hotels, your meals, everything is so much more. So it's much more difficult because there's less quantity, and costs have gone up.
Any last words about something that you took away from either your grandfather or your father that has stayed with you through the years?
Yeah. My dad, he always would tell me, to put one brick on top of the other. And I think that I have listened to that. And that we have had some opportunities, to really, aggressively grow at different times in the last, 25 years, while especially in the last 10, with some things. And I sometimes had to slow stuff down because, yes, there was some opportunity to make, real returns, but, and had I not done that, it could have been our demise if I hadn't, slowed things down. I'm not saying I didn't pursue them, but, we had to go one brick at a time. Otherwise the whole bunch comes tumbling down. And, my dad gave me a lot of advice. He told me I was going to go broke a lot of times too, but, and, some of the, your dad gives you advice, and it's because he loves you, but it does not mean he's always right. And, I remember my dad sometimes talking about, let me get that light. Sometimes talking about, they won't, produce that item because it's so cheap. And, those are, to me, those are dirty words, that you can never think that way. Production costs have nothing to do with the market. In the long run, yes, nobody will produce something for a loss forever, but that's not how the world works in reality. And so, yeah, there's not everything your father tells you is correct, but there are some things that have been very important that he told me about this business. And another thing, I guess, from my father, probably the biggest thing that I took away was integrity. And some people in the fur business, they don't like us, but we have had longtime competitors that absolutely didn't have the best opinion of us, and yet maybe they finish their business at the end of their working life, and they'll call us up and say, hey, can I store my stuff at your place, or can you sell it for me? Or, and it's happened, time and time again, where somebody that had an adversarial relationship, when it came time to trust us, that was never an issue. Everybody knew that Groenwald Fur and Wool, as far as trust, was the gold standard. And people literally from around the world know that. I mean, we have people that will maybe buy something in China and say, hey, can we store that at your place? And to me, that is just one of the most important things, that we have in this business. If we have nothing else, the people around the world, they know that we put their stuff first, and that whatever they have is protected in this building, and that if we say something is something, that's what it is. And I think that's just something that my dad really felt was important, is integrity, and we still have that. And we have goods in our freezers right now from a guy in China that I've met twice, and I don't know, maybe he's got $500,000 worth of stuff here, and he completely trusts us, and that's important stuff to me.
All right, thank you, Guy.
All right, thank you.